welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are podcasts. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments by email, dj@ArtistFirst.com. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
I'm Margaret. And today's show reminds me of a song.
Oh dear.
Shall I break out singing? I won't be that mean to the audience. But it is, there's a very famous song. But our topic today is, interestingly enough, yesterday. We're going to talk about yesterday, today, tomorrow. We're going to talk about all the parts of the tenses. No, we're not going to talk about tenses, but we are going to talk about yesterday from the point of view of this wonderful little saying. Would you read the saying? The saying is if you're not prepared, I will vamp a little bit. Look at the man behind the curtain. But I think the quote is nice.
Alrighty. Let's start your day with the broken pieces of yesterday. Every morning we wake up is the first day of the rest of our life. Author unknown.
Exactly. And it's pithy and it's profound. It sounds maybe a little bit obvious. But I think many people live and start each day, with the broken pieces of their past.
Right. And they've been trained to hang on to that. You're supposed to remember all the bad things so you don't do it again. That's usually the instruction that you're given, and you're like, wait, you want me to dwell on the bad stuff? I wake up in the morning? And that's pretty much what they're saying. That's a bit frantic in terms of your mind.
Exactly. I mean, the whole idea of your life is your experiences, and it is a terrible disease and a terrible thing to not have a memory. There are several different types of dementias and other diseases where people suffer from a lack of memory, unable to remember the last 10 minutes, unable to remember anything, that happened yesterday. Literally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a miserable existence from that point of view because, interestingly enough, not for you. You're just fine. But everyone else around you is pretty miserable because they're endlessly having to repeat themselves. If you've had to, had someone in your family who suffered from forgetfulness or from early stages of dementia, it can be extremely frustrating because you feel like you're just living in the constant, never-ending present, where they ask you the same question over and over again, for argument's sake. But the opposite is, I think, even more of a scourge and much more common. Where in essence, instead of living in the present moment or living, in the, I don't want to say in the now, but just, being where you are and sort of, enjoying your life, every waking moment is ruined in some way, shape, or form by the shadow of the past.
Right. Everything that you are looking at or making note of is a voice at the back of your head that's giving you criticism for all of it, or some kind of a judgment call, or you should have known that, or you were told that before, or you see how you are compared to that one. all this nonsense that plays in the back of the head is because that strange part of you wants you to remember all the brokenness that you had participated in the past.
Sort of an endless internal "I told you so."
Yes, but I think the point I'm trying to make is it points only to the broken pieces of your experience or your inability to cope or a lack of being able to bring yourself out of it. It just sort of keeps you in that broken space where it actually controls you through that brokenness. When someone is looking at something that they're sitting there going, I should have done this, or I could have done that, that moment's already gone. But you're living with a regret. And if you think of a regret as almost this poker, keeps burning you.
Oh, a hot poker, yeah.
Yeah, just the truth of the matter is that moment you will not get again. So you have to let it go. You have to learn how to let that go. Because without letting it go, we'll come back to this suffering.
Well, I love that analogy, the hot poker, because what's making it hot? Well, you're heating your own poker, to coin a phrase. The fires of regret are stoked by your mind, by your ego, in essence. What makes it painful? From the outside, someone may look at you and say, "Oh, it looks like a regular, normal, everyday person." But inside, you can be in agony, in sort of an endless state of self-torture, where the hot pokers of regret or the hot pokers of your past, your current self, critiquing your past self, or critiquing, where you are versus where you should have been, what you could have had. Oh, if only this one hadn't said that to that one, then I would have had X, Y, or Z. And these become not just voices in your head, but they become, as you said, hot pokers. They become emotional goads, which drive deep into your current experience. And you had a great, or not a great, but you had a experience with folks who were recovering from addiction.
Right.
And in this particular environment, this was sort of a halfway house or a recovery house, sort of a 12-step program, but not exactly. And when you would talk to these folks, first of all, a lot of them were really very real about themselves, really about their addictions, because they were in recovery to some extent. But they were very discerning about those who weren't,
Right.
who were just fooling themselves, and those who were, living in a certain type of agony, or they could remember living in a certain type of agony, which was largely self-imposed. Sometimes they were medicating themselves with drugs or alcohol because living with their regrets was worse, than that.
Right. And that's thing. It's one thing to have, well, I should have done this. But if you dwell there and continually dwell there so that your mind is not allowed to focus on anything else, this is when you start tearing pieces of yourself to shreds. It's not who you actually are. And there really is no reason to do that. You can feel, a regret about not having done it, but electing to stay there is choosing to suffer.
Yes. And that's a very interesting thing that you just said. It's you know yesterday is sorry, your memories are always there, but at some level you're choosing to access them. You know, people will say, "Well, I couldn't help it. It reminded me of this, or reminded me of that. It made me think about this. It's made me angry because it reminded me of it." It's almost as though they're not involved. That that their memories have a presence and a body of their own, a beingness of their own.
Right. They're not in charge of themselves. They're letting the memory be in charge of them.
But in truth, you are in charge. But it's easy to allow the memories, in essence, to run you, because their voices are usually, it's either your voice or someone you may have been associated with, someone who was an authority figure, someone who you have a relationship with, and that voice. People say, "Oh, it's my father's voice. I always hear telling me I did this wrong and I did that wrong," or "It's my mother's voice. I always hear telling me, you should have been this and you should have been that," or it's some other who commands a attention. Has a it has had an indelible mark upon your psyche, and in truth, they're not there. Oftentimes, they may not physically be there, or they may not even physically be alive anymore, and yet they live on. How do these persona live on? Well, they're you. You've internalized yesterday. You've turned yesterday into today and every day. And oftentimes these things, Margaret, have not only acquire a life of their own, but they acquire a certain amount of your own life force, your own energy. They sap your ability to deal with the present moment, to just to be an effective human being in your daily day-to-day lives. When somebody is presented with a challenge and it immediately drags them into a past situation where something bad happened, they'll often react in a completely unrelated or uncalled for way. They're triggered. They react with great anger or great fear, or they do something that's like, you go, well, what made you do that? Well, 20 years ago when this happened, it was so bad, and I had to, and it just instead of informing, instead of becoming part of your experience which you can draw upon, you say, well, I've seen it done this way, I've seen it done that way, we should think about this, we should think about that, but in the present moment it looks like it's okay. No. You're dragged, really almost physically dragged, down a pathway in your mind, which feels like a real pathway, and will result in sometimes real actions, real lashing out, real anger, real present day consequences.
It is difficult when one is triggered, because I always wonder about that term, being triggered. How does that actually work when you're triggered? And as a certain kind of energetic charge to it. So it's almost as if that charge puts together a form that allows it to express suddenly. It's almost like a mousetrap. You bait it and you wait until the right movement comes along, and then it snaps. And it's, of course, with a mousetrap, it's that tension, that energy is holding it in this rigid form until the right thing triggers it. having that awareness, understanding that, okay, wait a minute, the part of me that's going to snap if trigger, and I would prefer not to snap.
That's such a wonderful analogy, because a mousetrap has a stored amount of energy. It sits there looking very innocuous. That's why the mice come up, and maybe it weakens a bit if you think, well, is it really baited? But it really is almost baited. What it is there's a piece of your persona, of your unconscious state, which is looking for, which is sensitized to a trigger. In the case of a mousetrap, it's sensitized to vibrations or something. But in this case, it's much more subtle than that. And yet, as you say, when the trigger is sensed, you snap. And the snap is still at a subconscious level. In other words, the process has been studied, but in short, the triggers occur on a sub-aware level. In other words, something is watching that is not necessarily your awareness. You're just going along willy-nilly driving. And something at a sub-aware level is looking out for threats. So when somebody jumps out into the road, you're stamping on the brake before you realize, and then afterwards you feel the fear and those same types of sub-aware surveillance modes are out there for all the triggers all the mouse traps that you load up. And when they see one, there's no thinking involved. There's no, oh, gee, there's something that looks like a threat. No, it just goes, bam, snap. And the snap starts a chain reaction of events that long before you become aware at a hey, I see somebody jumping in the road level, you're already doing something. Well, in this case, long before you become aware, you're frightened, or you're angry, or you're suddenly afraid or upset or feeling overwhelmed or whatever it is. And then, the mind is our ego is a wonderful thing. The mind likes to fill in the gaps. Something happens. You're suddenly angry, fearful, whatever. And then the mind says, let's write a story. I'm going to write a story now. I'm going to say why I'm angry and whose fault it is and what I could have done and what I should have done and why, this one reminds me of this one, and this one is like my father, and this one's like my younger brother, and I fill it all in really a very short moment of time, and then it starts the gears turning. All of a sudden, not only it's not just a script, but the script is suddenly animated, and that's the electric pathway in your mind that you've just triggered. And all the energy that was in the mousetrap goes flowing down that circuit, roaring along, pushing everything around in your mind and getting you to do things. Open your mouth and start to scream, suddenly become very afraid, suddenly become extremely anxious. All those things, the emotional storm and the mental storm, are you're fully in it before you really become aware.
Right. And that's what I find fascinating, because you're sitting there wondering, well, what part of me, wait a minute, set this? It's an experience that I just really didn't like, and then that part is like, well, we don't want to go through that again, so I'm going to set this up. But setting that up it's just snap. There's no finesse to it whatsoever. It's just this wham kind of thing. And I look at that like, well, can you harness that energy to be able to put appropriate responses together instead of this random, take out the baseball bat and beat it. It's always interesting to see someone's in that kind of triggered response, because as you just said, they begin to be aware that they're actually in it. It when they're like maybe a minute in, suddenly, wait a minute, why am I screaming?
Yes. So I don't want to stray too far. I mean, these are the external and internal effects. When Tolle talks about these things, he talks about the pain body, and there are other terms that other psychologists and scientists have used. But these are all just, these are terms. The at the base level, the being, the consciousness, is involved in both setting up the mousetraps and getting the snap. It only feels like you're at sea because what's at sea is your persona. Your persona is dragged into the maelstrom. Your persona is in the anger ship or the fear ship. Your persona is the one that you're suddenly screaming. And all these are really at the level of an unconscious reaction. And yeah, a minute or so or however long in, you go, what kind of monster am I? If you have some sort of introspection, you start to come out of it. You start to almost wake yourself up out of this and realize that, maybe I'm hurting someone. Maybe I'm acting like an idiot. Maybe people are thinking that I'm a crazy person. But it's so far down the pike that the damage is done, and oftentimes these things feed upon themselves. A trigger which makes you angry, and then you lash out, and whatever bad things come to you from that, they become more broken pieces of yesterday that you'll stuff into your mousetrap to set it even higher next time. So these none of these behaviors cure themselves. The only way, and Ekman says this, Paul Ekman, but there are many, the Dalai Lama also, the only way to do it is to understand, get ahead of the mousetrap. The Dalai Lama says, understand that you will be triggered, that you have these triggers, that they're there. You've seen them operate upon yourself. And so you're not going to be able to stop what triggered you, and you're not going to be able to stop the trigger. What he says is to try to become as quickly aware of your change of state as you possibly can. Move the time period between when you start and when you actually realize that you're acting like a crazy person, so that immediately as these emotions start to rise, you recognize them. So, I'm feeling angry. And at that point, you can become aware. The consciousness becomes aware. I'm becoming angry. Or fearful, which our little monk was saying. Here's fear. Why? Fear comes up all of a sudden. And then prior to these triggers, you can work on, in essence, the dissipation of that energy. As you just said, Margaret, maybe there's something useful we can do with this. Directed energy is far more useful than an explosion. A gasoline explosion can be a destructive force, or it can be what moves your car, in a piston. So that directed energy, that controlled and channeled and useful energy, will at least take what you've put into the trigger and keep it from causing, more triggers, or making that trigger worse the next time and the next time and the next time. That's what the Dalai has said as a sort of a way of
Making space so that you would be able to consciously begin to heal yourself. Because if you really think about it, these habit forms, which are quite natural for humans, we form habits to be able to survive. But to understand when a habit form is destructive, then you have to consciously choose to change it. It could be a destructive habit, action, or a destructive or a constructive habit like an exercise. But to understand that that is exactly how you're wired to form a habit. Let's face it, most of us just don't want to be disturbed out of our habit form. We don't want to get up at a different time. We don't want to go to sleep at a different time. I'd rather not do that. No, I don't want to. Very funny.
Because we're comfortable.
Yes, and when you realize that that's part of you, that's when the consciousness almost has to take a hand and say, now, we've decided to do this now. We understand we don't want to. But this is where we need to be.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this, but some of the portions of like a 12-step program are exactly that. You accept responsibility for your yesterday. Yesterdays we can talk more about yesterdays. Yesterdays aren't just regrets. Sometimes they're grudges. Sometimes they're holding a grievance against a situation or a person, and part of that grievance is, it's not necessarily a triggered mousetrap, but now we've talked about this in the past. You leave a part of yourself behind at that stage of development, holding that grieved or injured energy, and these may not be mousetraps in the same way, but what they are fragments. We talk here about the broken pieces of yesterday. Well, the broken pieces of you can get stuck in yesterday. You can in essence fragment yourself into a lot of little yous, personae, which hold on to a past thing. So then when that personae comes up, you replay in your mind in great excruciating detail that past event. One of the names that people give it is like a PTSD or something like that, and that's a perfectly valid expression of this type of past regret. But it doesn't have to be so debilitating. It can just be, oh, I never get anything good because every time anything happens to me, it always happens bad, and I always lose, and I always this, and they're always too expensive, and I always never get the opportunity, and that emotional baggage feels extremely real. It's you, and it's your memory, and it comes back in just technicolor, sound, feel, taste, touch, smell. All five senses are involved, and from the moment that becomes you, in other words, takes you over, and you're lost in that memory, all the things that happen to you become as though they happened this moment. All the fear or the anger, or whatever, and then the body, because as many have said, Tolle says, and many others, the body has no clue about yesterday. The body just knows we're under attack, or we're being scared, or we're angry, and so all those stress chemicals, the cortisols and the adrenaline, and you're breathing hard, and your face is flushed, and your hands are clenched, or you're sweating in fear, and you're sleepless and walking the floor and rolling your head back and forth, and all that because 20 years ago X, Y, or Z happened, and that 20-year-old you has dragged you right back to that moment, and is going to is going to walk you through your own steps, because that fragment has the power that you put into it at that time. You kind of walled it off, didn't process it, wanted it to never happen again, but it becomes like a cyst almost.
And I believe we've reached the halfway point of our show.
Speaking of cysts, okay, let's go back to the studio and we'll take a little break and have an encapsulated moment, and we'll come back on the other side. We'll talk about the broken pieces of yesterday.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lynes is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lynes, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. Moonstones and murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some moonstones and murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir. There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hey, this is Java. Stay tuned for my debut album, Northern Sun, which drops on January 28, 2022. And in the meantime, check out my website at java.com, GJOVA, for released music, videos, and so much more. And you're listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, C-Man. And we are going to start with the broken pieces of the last half hour. No, we're not. We're going to let those go and not refer back to them, except perhaps a little. But we are talking today about yesterday and how how difficult it is, because it is quite difficult. If you've spent a large portion of your life, preserving, and Margaret, people actually do. They literally will set in stone their yesterdays, and it's an interesting analogy because they become like millstones. They become like Jacob Marley's chain, that you forge, and then you carry around with you, unseen. Nobody can see or hear or except you, your chain of yesterdays, and they are not, unfortunately, what people make that chain out of. It's not the pleasant memories. It's not the good times. It's not the times where everything was going wonderfully. We human beings tend to remember, the bad times.
They indulge in the bad times. And because I think that's one thing that we really hadn't been trained to, is not to indulge in thinking about something over and over again. Thing that somehow you'll get a different solution or a different viewpoint. We understand we have to try again, but try without changing anything and still being surprised at getting the same result. That is a lesson that needs to be learned. It's not working. It's not working. Thing that it works. Something that we humans, we just have it. We always hope. But you've got Harry, way that you are trying to solve this problem. And if all the pieces of information given to you are exactly the same as they were the last time you looked at this, you don't need to do another evaluation. And that little mechanism, like, no, I don't need to look at that again. No, we went through it in great detail before. We don't need to look at that again, unless there's something else that we haven't, a new piece of information we haven't had. That is a discipline, because somehow we think that just doing it over and over and over again the same way is going to change it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take on, because in essence, you have to trust yourself in the sense, and that constant reevaluation is sort of an expression of distrust in oneself. If you know what they sort of say is, if you've done your best, that's all you could have done. And in any situation, and in the case where you are basically spending your time going through a past situation over and over again, it's really a waste of time. But even in any situation, you have to be comfortable enough to trust your reaction or trust what you did. Perhaps it's informed by the past. This is healthy. Perhaps it's novel, but yet your training or your discipline or whatever can help you in this situation. But then, the end of the day comes. The next day you wake up and you go, oh man, I could have done this, and I could have done that, and I should have said this, and I should have said that. And these are the beginnings of a sort of regret of not, and I think there's a way around it, but of not trusting what you did was the right thing, or just the appropriate thing. Your present self is doubting and judging your past self. And you just mentioned, and then going over that can become a neurosis, a psychosis, and it can also become a waste of time and energy, especially in the sense where you're going through past events which are immutable, unchangeable, cannot be affected, really don't exist. Going through those events over and over in your mind, rethinking them, relitigating them. I could have done this, could have done that. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And adding, in essence, to them the emotional charge, which will come back later, perhaps as a real anxiety, a real triggered thing, a mousetrap. What you're doing, in some ways, is winding the spring. You're turning it and turning it and turning it until it gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and then you're putting it on the shelf somewhere. A nice big loaded mousetrap that you can snap on your fingers someday. And what you said is the exact way of kind of you basically say, well, look, that's the past. I did the best I could. Yes, perhaps with a different situation I might have done slightly differently, whatever. But the reconsideration of something which has happened without any new information, or really just the realization that no matter how often I think about what happened, I cannot change it. I can only resolve perhaps to learn from it and do better the next time. But if you sit there and without any new information, reconsider, you get into that habit form, and then when something new does happen, you may spend 20 minutes reconsidering, and not actually being able to act in the moment with your best tool, which is your heart. Your heart will tell you in any situation what needs to be, not necessarily what you want or what you judge, or certainly what you remember or what happened before, but in the present moment, all that can inform your decision. It can play into the moment of now because it's your experience. It's yours, entirely yours. But if you then funnel all that into the place where you can actually deal with the moment of now, which is in the heart deals in the now. When you ask your heart, and it seems from the outside to be seamless, but when you ask your heart, here we are in this situation, what should we do? So you accept the situation entirely because you can't change that. You bring in all your past experience, not the broken pieces, but the pieces which you learned from and which are important perhaps in this moment. Maybe most of them are not, but the ones you think are important. And then bring it all into the heart and let the heart, in essence, become the arbiter, the processor, the place where the moment of now can resolve into the next moment of now. That's the way to not make them broken pieces, but to make them tools in a sense, or certainly information which now there's a new situation. So all that past information with this new situation, you say, well, all those things almost worked, or they worked pretty well, so I have that in my back pocket. But this is a little new, and so I have my heart, and all that synthesis can become in a very clean and non-mousetrappy way, a way to deal with the moment.
I wonder sometimes that the broken pieces of you, brokenness, is an energy that even describe this. It's a wholeness where you function smoothly and you are capable of handling whatever is crossing your path in that moment. But when you're dealing from a broken center, and everything is skewed, it's not flowing as it need be. There isn't a clean flow. It is a erratic kind of energy. And that kind of frequency where it's staticky almost, I don't know how to describe this feel. And it's missing a piece of itself. And when you're missing a piece of your heart, rest, you can't come to peace because you're just aware of what is missing continually. And how can you ease that? This is because I'm thinking in terms of the beginning of the quote, don't start your
day
with the broken pieces of yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Wake up broken. The only way to fulfill that statement. Waking up broken means that you're aware of your brokenness the minute you wake up. You're not aware of being alive. I'm here. I am alive. Nothing else, any of the forms of brokenness come into your mind. Your eyes are open and you're looking around going, okay, I'm here.
You can't be broken in the present moment.
If you are present, right. Because those broken forms are not forms that have been broken. Not by you, or maybe by you. Regardless, there's still a form. And to wake up in your consciousness, your I am here state is where all that can be put in its appropriate place. And its appropriate place is in the place of form and not being.
That's beautifully said. An infant or a child wakes up in the I am.
Mm-hmm.
They're not waking up, generally speaking, in any kind of a broken state. They wake up, and the day is new and bright, and I'm ready to just get up and go. And that analogy is extremely healing. The present moment is always whole. It's only in in the fragmentary persona, in the broken pieces, that you can tear the present moment apart, or rather, that you cannot realize the present moment, that you can live in a memory or in a broken form, or in essence, see yourself. I am broken. The I am is the present moment. I am who I am. I am. Here I am. But I am broken is not the present moment. I am a drug addict. I am a murderer. I am an idiot. I am all. You're living in the past. You're living in an illusion. We said this in the addendum that we write. The yesterday feels real. It feels like it's something, right? I mean, it happened. That's what people say. Well, you know what happened? Yes, but the past is entirely in your mind. Entirely in your mind. Every part of it is just a remembered form. A really just your impression of what happened to you. When they talk to people who are witnesses to a particular event, everyone has their impression. Everyone has their story of what happened. And then you might have the luxury of a videotape. You could ask 100 people what happened. They'll all tell you what they remember. And then if you look at the tape, you go, man, 100 witnesses and not one of them got it right. Because those yesterdays are from a certain point of view, they are just forms, they're just remembrances of something which doesn't exist anymore. However, they feel real. They feel like they're happening right now because your body reacts, your emotions react. You feel like that moment really is the now. And then you identify, you use your mind and your ego to become the moment. So that investiture of putting yourself into the past is always toxic. It's always a waste of energy because you have now done the thing which Tolle says everyone does. You have overlooked the present moment, and it's for you. It's not happening anymore. You're gone. Your current level of existence is in the intangible, non-existent form that happened God knows how many years ago or yesterday. There's another whole discussion about the future forms. We're just going to stay with yesterday now. And as we mentioned earlier, you carry them. They take up an energetic space. Those forms take up an energetic, parasitic existence in your consciousness. They live off of you like ticks or some other parasite. And they're bloated and fat and evil from the point of view of what they do to your present moment. Don't let a fragment live off of your current existence. Don't let a parasite drain your life force, which is what these things are doing.
Well, that is what form does. Whatever form you engage in, you wind up feeding so that it can exist in that experience with you. But form is not awareness. It is not you, who you are at your core. And forms are always interesting. They're sort of like toys. If you can think of forms in terms of toys, I think that would help tremendously. It's like, well, let's see, let me try to put this together. What happens if we do this? Sometimes the Lego blocks stand, and sometimes they just fall. And to understand that you're here to play with the forms, it takes the charge out of whether you've done it right or not. The rightness of it becomes whether or not the toy is able to be made into something that you were designing, or just a mess on the floor.
And both are okay.
Right. It's just, okay, well, that's kind of what it looks like, and I guess we'll clean that up.
We'll clean that up, and we'll go have the present moment, which might be lunch. But this is exactly it. The broken pieces of yesterday are not you, and they're not real. And you have to use them as tools or toys, inform yourself with the present moment, and then use the heart to actually live in the present moment. And then your consciousness will be you. You will be there. Anyway, we are here. It is not yesterday. It is right now, and I think we are at the end of the hour. So I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.